The air on the 40th floor of the Barron Associates skyscraper was thin, cold, and tasted of expensive air conditioning and pure anxiety. Behind the floor-to-ceiling windows, the New York skyline glittered indifferently. In the center of the cavernous conference room, around a slab of Brazilian rosewood so polished it reflected the grim faces above it, sat 7 of the most powerful figures in the tech investment world. Augustus Gus Barron, the founder and majority shareholder, loosened his Hermes tie, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. "This isn't just a contract," he said, his voice a low, gravelly thing strained to its limit. "This is a keys to the kingdom deal. If we misinterpret a single clause, a single word, we don't just lose the deal. We hand our entire R&D roadmap on a silver platter to Xenon Dynamics, and they will bury us." The document in question was a nightmare of linguistic complexity. It wasn't written in one language, or even two. It was a labyrinthine tapestry of legal English, technical Japanese, financial Mandarin, and snippets of obscure European dialects, all woven together with what seemed like deliberate obscurity. They'd hired the best team from Harvard Linguistics, a renowned AI translation firm from Silicon Valley, and a famously expensive polyglot from Switzerland. All had failed. The AI had spit out gibberish. The polyglot had thrown up his hands in frustration, and the Harvard team had presented a translation so full of holes and conflicting interpretations it was worse than useless. "The call with the Xenon board is in." Gus checked his Rolex. 5 hours. "If we don't have a perfect, airtight translation and a strategy to counter these hidden landmines, we're not just finished. We're a cautionary tale." In the far corner of the room, partially hidden by an oversized potted fiddle leaf fig, stood Maria, the evening cleaning lady. She clutched her cart, waiting for the meeting of titans to conclude so she could do her job. Beside her, clutching a worn copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, was her daughter, Chloe. At 14, she had her mother's serious dark eyes and a quiet intensity that most mistook for shyness. Her school had an early dismissal, and with no one to watch her, she'd come to work with Maria, as she sometimes did. Gus slammed his palm on the table, making everyone jump. "I'd pay $1 million cash, right now, to anyone who could make sense of this word salad." Maria, without thinking, driven by a mother's boundless, if sometimes misplaced, pride, spoke softly into the tense silence. "My Chloe, she speaks 7 languages." The sentence hung in the air for a moment, a bizarre, almost comical intrusion. Then, Gus Barron threw his head back and laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was a sharp, derisive bark that echoed off the glass walls. 7 languages? He managed between chuckles, wiping a tear from his eye. "And I suppose she's also a certified corporate lawyer and a quantum cryptographer? Get real. This is a document that broke machines worth more than your life savings." The other partners shifted uncomfortably, some offering Maria pitying smiles, others looking annoyed at the interruption. Chloe, however, didn't flinch. She placed her book carefully on her mother's cart and took a single step forward. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and steady, devoid of any adolescent tremor. "The problem isn't the languages. It's the structure. It's a cipher. May I look?" The audacity of the request stunned the room into silence. Gus stared at her, his amusement fading into cold curiosity. He was a man who appreciated audacity, even when it came from the most unexpected places. With a dismissive wave, he gestured to the stack of papers. "Sure, kid. Knock yourself out. Give us all a good laugh." Chloe approached the table, ignoring the condescending smirks of the partners. She didn't sit. She simply leaned over the first page, her eyes scanning the text. Her fingers, delicate and precise, traced the lines of text. For a full minute, there was no sound but the hum of the HVAC and the soft rustle of paper. Then, she began to murmur. It was a low, rhythmic sound, a flow of syllables that switched and melded the guttural tones of German, the lyrical flow of Italian, the precise clicks of Hausa, the complex characters of Mandarin spoken aloud. To the executives, it sounded like nonsense, but there was an undeniable, unnerving confidence in it. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up, her gaze locking directly with Gus's. "It's not a contract, it's a test. And you're failing it." The room, which had been buzzing with quiet impatience, went utterly still. "Excuse me?" Gus said, his voice dangerously quiet. "This clause here," Chloe said, pointing to a dense paragraph that blended French and technical Korean. "It appears to be about liability caps. But it's not. The verb conjugation in the Korean section switches mid-sentence to a form used exclusively in historical legal texts, nullifying the entire French paragraph that follows. It's a trap. If you agree to this, you're agreeing to unlimited liability disguised as a cap." One of the partners, a sharp-faced woman named Evelyn Reed, leaned forward, her skepticism etched deep into her features. "And how, precisely, would a child know that?" Chloe didn't even look at her. Because the switch is signaled by this character, she tapped a seemingly innocuous symbol in the margin. It's a marker used in pre-20th century Korean court documents to denote a nullification clause. It's not in any modern digital lexicon. You have to have read the original texts. Gus was no longer smiling. He was staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a dawning, almost frightening intensity. "What else?" he demanded, his voice a whisper. Chloe's fingers flew across the pages, her mind working at a speed that was almost visible. "The payment schedule is a phantom. The numbers are stated in yuan, but the decimal placements are referenced using a system from a remote Danish dialect, effectively moving the decimal point 2 places to the right. They're asking for 100 times more than what the English text states." She flipped to the final page. "And this is the real masterpiece. The termination clause is written in a blend of Arabic and Latin. The Arabic specifies that any dispute will be settled under Sharia law in a Dubai court. The Latin, which is woven through the Arabic script using a form of lexical steganography, asserts that any attempt to litigate voids the entire contract and immediately transfers all intellectual property outlined in Exhibit B, your Project Chimera blueprints, to Xenon. They don't want to work with you, Mr. Baron. They want to own you." A cold dread settled over the room. Evelyn Reed's face was ashen. Another partner, a man named Richard Schiff, pulled at his collar as if it were choking him. Gus Barron slowly sank into his chair, the fight gone out of him. The girl wasn't just translating, she was performing an autopsy on a predator they hadn't even seen coming. He looked from the incomprehensible document to the calm 14-year-old girl who had unraveled its secrets in minutes. "How?" was all he could manage to say. Chloe finally looked up, a faint, serious smile touching her lips. "You hire translators to find words. You need someone who can find intent. The languages are just the lock. The meaning is the key." Maria, from her corner, watched with her heart hammering against her ribs. She had always known her daughter was special, that her mind worked in ways she couldn't comprehend. But seeing her here, in this temple of money and power, holding these masters of the universe in the palm of her hand, was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Gus leaned forward, his billionaire's bravado completely stripped away, replaced by raw, desperate need. "Can you fix this? Can you give us something to fight back with? Name your price." Chloe glanced at her mother, then back at the mountain of a man brought low by words. "The price is your attention. Now, if you want to save your company, everyone should listen very, very carefully." The battle for Baron Associates had begun, and its most unlikely general had just taken command. The silence in the wake of her statement was absolute, broken only by the faint, high-frequency whine of the conference room's electronics. 7 sets of eyes, accustomed to evaluating risk in the billions and maneuvering corporate titans, were now fixed on a young girl in a faded band t-shirt and jeans. Gus Barron found his voice first, though it was stripped of its usual command. "All right," he said, the word sounding more like an exhale. "We're listening." He gestured to the empty seat at the head of the table, the one usually reserved for the most important guest. It was a silent, monumental concession. Chloe didn't move to the seat. She remained standing, leaning over the document, her presence somehow making the vast, opulent room feel small. "First, you need to understand their psychology. They didn't send this to negotiate. They sent it to dominate. Every ambiguity, every false clause, is a landmine meant to exploit your assumptions. They assume you'll rely on AI or high-priced, specialized translators who only see their own sliver of the puzzle. They didn't account for a synthesist." Evelyn Reed, her initial skepticism now warring with a dawning, horrified respect, spoke. "A what?" "Someone who can see how the pieces fit together, not just the languages, but the legal frameworks, the cultural contexts behind the idioms, the historical weight of certain phrases." Chloe pointed to the liability clause again. "This isn't just clever lawyering, it's a cultural feint. It relies on a Western negotiator's ignorance of East Asian legal history. It's arrogant, and that's their weakness." Richard Schiff, the CFO, finally found his voice, tinged with panic. "So what do we do? We have 5 hours. We can't possibly redline this entire thing and send a coherent counterproposal." "We don't redline it," Chloe said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We build a new document, a mirror. We use their own structure but replace their poisoned clauses with our own. We show them we not only see their traps but can build better ones." A faint, grim smile touched Gus's lips. The girl was talking his language now. "A counterattack. A demonstration of parity," Chloe corrected gently. "The goal isn't to cheat them, it's to force them to negotiate in good faith on a level playing field. Right now, they think they're playing chess with pigeons. We need to show them we're grandmasters." She looked at Gus. "I need a laptop, and I need access to your legal database for standard Barron Associates. Boilerplate clauses on confidentiality, arbitration, and liability. The strongest ones you have." Gus didn't hesitate. He snapped his fingers at his assistant, who was hovering by the door, mouth agape. "Jennifer, my spare MacBook, now. And grant her guest access to the legal server full privileges." The assistant scurried out. Chloe turned to Evelyn Reed. "You're head of legal?" Evelyn, a woman who had argued before the Supreme Court, nodded, momentarily stunned at being put on the spot by a teenager. "I need you to work with me. I'll handle the multilingual synthesis and identify the structural hooks. You need to provide the airtight legal language to slot into those hooks. We're building a patchwork quilt, and every stitch has to hold." Evelyn Reed, for the first time in decades, felt a thrill that wasn't related to a stock price. "All right," she said, moving to sit next to where Chloe would be. The laptop arrived. Chloe sat, opened it, and her fingers flew across the keyboard, logging into the system with a guest code. The executives watched, mesmerized, as she split the screen. On one side, she had a scanned copy of the Xenon contract. On the other, a blank document. She began typing at a blistering pace, not in English, but in a fluid combination of characters and alphabets, creating a meta-document that acted as her personal translation key. Maria watched from her corner, her cleaning cart forgotten. She saw the fierce concentration on her daughter's face, the same look she had when she was devouring those old, dense books from the library sale, the ones in languages Maria couldn't begin to recognize. Pride swelled in her chest, so potent it brought tears to her eyes. She quickly wiped them away, not wanting to break the spell. "Okay," Chloe said, her voice calm amidst the storm of her typing. "The payment clause, the Danish dialect decimal trick. We don't just correct it, we anchor it. We state the figure in numbers, in words, in yuan, and then we add a clause referencing the IMF's special drawing rights basket on the specific date of signing. It makes it mathematically and financially immutable. They can't dispute it without disputing the IMF. Richard Schiff, the CFO, blinked. That's brilliant. It's overkill, but it's brilliant. With them, overkill is the minimum requirement, Chloe said without looking up. Evelyn, I need the standard liability cap language, but I'm going to embed it within a reference to the Uniform Commercial Code, as adopted by the State of New York and the UN Convention on Contracts for the International Sale of Goods. It creates a dual-layer protection. They'll have to fight in two legal universes simultaneously if they want to break it. Evelyn's eyes widened. That's aggressive. It's defensive, Chloe countered. They started it. She worked for another 10 minutes, a conductor orchestrating a symphony of law and language. She'd murmur a instruction, I need a force majeure clause that includes acts of cyber warfare and algorithmic failure, and Evelyn would provide the legal text, which Chloe would then seamlessly weave into the multilingual framework, often tweaking a word in the German or French section to make it resonate more forcefully with a European reader. Gus watched, his mind reeling. This wasn't just damage control. This was a masterclass in international negotiation. This girl was rebuilding their entire defensive and offensive position from the ground up in real time. She finally reached the termination clause, the most dangerous part. She stopped typing and looked at Gus. This is the crux. They want your IP. We can't just nullify their clause, we have to invert it. How? Gus asked, leaning forward. We create a poison pill clause of our own, Chloe said, her eyes gleaming with strategic ferocity. We state that any attempt to litigate or void the contract under the terms they've hidden automatically triggers the immediate, irrevocable, open-source release of the core, non-proprietary algorithms of Project Chimera to a pre-specified consortium of universities. It doesn't hurt us fatally, but it completely destroys the commercial value of the IP for anyone, including Xenon. They'd be stealing a crown that turns to dust the moment they touch it. It makes the theft pointless. The room gasped. It was a nuclear option. Ruthless. Brilliant. You're asking us to sign a document that threatens to burn down our own project, Richard Schiff whispered, horrified. I'm giving you a shield made of fire, Chloe replied, her voice steady. They only understand strength. This shows them we'd rather burn it all than be bullied. They won't risk it. The clause will never be triggered. Its only purpose is to exist, to be seen and understood. Gus Barron looked at the girl, then at the faces of his terrified partners. He saw the future of his life's work being decided by a cleaning lady's daughter. He thought of the arrogant laughter of the Xenon CEO. He made a decision. Do it, he said, his voice firm. Draft the clause. Chloe nodded and began to type, her fingers crafting the legal equivalent of a tactical warhead. Evelyn Reed provided the precise language, her earlier skepticism now completely replaced by a fervent, almost giddy collaboration. As Chloe worked, integrating the final, devastating clause, the initial document of defeat was transformed. It was no longer a surrender form. It was a treaty written by equals, a document that spoke with a single, clear, and formidable voice in a dozen different tongues. After 45 minutes of intense, silent work, she finally stopped. She leaned back and exhaled for the first time. It's done. On the screen was a perfectly formatted, dense document. It looked exactly like the original in structure and length, but every poisonous word had been replaced with fortified, unassailable text. The hidden daggers had been melted down and recast into an impenetrable suit of armor. Now, Chloe said, looking at Gus, we send it back. Not in 5 hours. Now, let them sweat. Let them scramble to understand how you unraveled their masterpiece in under an hour. Gus Barron looked at the document, then at Chloe. A slow, real smile spreading across his face for the first time that day. He knew power, he knew intelligence, and he was looking at both in its purest, most unexpected form. "Jennifer," he said to his assistant, his voice booming with restored confidence, "get Xenon's lead negotiator on the phone. Right now. Tell him Gus Barron is calling to discuss their interesting proposal." The game had changed.